This is my story of meeting a Greek Orthodox priest and the profound impact it had on me. So a little over a year ago, I was asked to teach a series on other religions and other denominations within Christianity, and really just kind of an apologetic series and try to explain why we're right and others are wrong. And it was a great series and idea, but initially when I said yes, I made one condition. I said that I will only do this if you give me the opportunity to take the time. I was working on staff at a church at this point, to go and meet with these people that you want me to represent, because I don't want to strawman their opinions, and I don't want to be painting a caricature without real people, names, and faces in my mind. And so the church obliged, and that's what I did. But after the experience, I ended up not ever teaching that apologetic series and instead teaching a series on loving across the line, how to engage with people who are different than you, because first I thought I was better suited to teach that. The series length got shortened. I didn't think I could do it justice, but I also thought that this was something that is so important. But what I want to share with you specifically is one part of that meeting. Aside from just how kind it was for him to take the meeting and how he really taught me a lot and represented Orthodoxy really well, the thing that had the biggest impact on me, that has really shaped me over the year and a half or so since this time, was the way he introduced me to the church fathers. Growing up as a Protestant, in my church, a large non-denominational evangelical church, church fathers just weren't something we talked about. We never really referenced them. I had heard of a couple like St. Augustine, who I probably called Augustine at that point, but forgive me, we all have our growth to do. But really, it just wasn't something we talked about. There was this sense that like in the book of Acts, we get a picture of like the early church that was unadulterated and it was great, but then pretty soon it turned into just blending with the empire, and then it got really political and it was bad, and then Catholicism bad, Martin Luther good, and then Protestantism. That was about my sketch of church history growing up. And so as I was sitting there that day with Father Mustakas, and he was going through some of the distinctives of Eastern Orthodoxy, he kept bringing up different councils and just different ways of doing things, and specifically bringing up many church fathers. And it was at this point in the meeting that I came to a very, very important, crucial point. You see, he began to list these things like the Council of Nicaea and John Chrysostom and all these names and places and ecumenical councils and these things that I had never heard of. He was talking about heresies that I didn't even know were heresies, and Orthodox. Like, I was way in over my head. And this is the point that was so important, because what was really tempting for me to do, and maybe you've been here yourself, because if you're like me, it's really easy to just go, yeah, exactly. Nicaea, can't forget that. Chalcedon, how could you not know the Chalcedonian definition? Hypostatic, yep. But I had no idea what those things were, and it was tempting to save face and just pretend. But in this moment, thank God, I decided to humble myself and say, whoa, like, actually, I don't know what you're talking about. Could you explain? And when we decide to take that step of humility, that is when we can learn so much more. And this isn't a teaching video, so we're not going to go super in depth on that, but I just want to make that comment that it's so important that rather than trying to put out an image that we know what people are talking about and we know everything, it's so important to be able to admit, like, actually, I don't know. Can you teach me? Because that's how we can learn, and that's how we can grow. But in any case, as he started rattling off these names and dates and the filioque and all these things, I finally got him to pause and be like, well, actually, can you explain some of this to me? And he explained so happily about, the major cities and ecumenical councils and different church fathers and what these things all meant. And that sparked in me this sense of, oh my goodness, there's this whole world that I know nothing about. And from that moment on, I became very interested in the church fathers. In fact, after that fall, I went away to Moody Bible Institute, and I was taking a class called Research Writing. And one of the things in that class was you spend nearly the whole semester working on this one research paper. It's like a research paper in slow motion. The whole point of the class is to teach you to write well and research well. But you could pick any topic you wanted. And so for me, the choice was really easy. I said, I want to do one on the church fathers. And because of that meeting with Father Mustakas, I began to really dig into this. And at this point, I'd gotten really interested just learning about all these names and dates and these controversies and these councils and all of these things that shaped Christianity into what it was that I just didn't even realize. I mean, in my mind, it went from Acts to 99 Theses in Wittenberg. Like, I just had a real lack of church history. And then as I began digging in, I realized just our theological ancestry. It's so rich and there is so much there. And I never would have done that, or at least it would have taken me a lot longer, if I had never met this Orthodox priest who was kind enough to introduce me to the world of the ancient church and how things were done in these early church fathers and how that tradition has been passed along, and then how Orthodoxy contrasts with Catholicism and how both of them contrast with Protestantism. And it wasn't so enamoring to me that I've left Protestantism. And I want to encourage you that as a Protestant, I don't think you actually have to give up on church history. I don't think you have to be scared of the fathers that they might make you Catholic. I think you should go where truth leads and you should explore what they had to say. And it's not that they're infallible, that, each one of them just had this direct line to God that we don't have, and somehow buried in their writings is the truth that will finally make everything make sense. Like, they disagreed on a lot. They weren't perfect. They were figuring things out too. But in any case, they do show us like how doctrine was originally passed down and what the early church looked like and how they were settling controversies and how they were thinking through things. And it just gives us resources that we don't have if we ignore them. And I think for so many of Protestants like myself, it can be tempting to take sola scriptura into solo scriptura and only ever read the Bible and read the Bible alone. But just because we believe that the Bible is the ultimate authority doesn't mean that we shouldn't look to these other sources. I mean, you probably read commentaries. Well, why not expand your commentary vocabulary? Why not expand your theological horizons and look into these early church fathers? You'll learn so much. And sometimes you'll disagree, and sometimes you'll agree, and sometimes you'll learn new things that you won't know what to do with. But it's a journey that is well worth it. And as I wrote that research paper and I really did a deep dive on a couple church fathers and a more surface level on just that era, the patristic era in general, I learned so much, and my theology, I think, is so much better grounded for having done it. It doesn't do us any good to just pretend like we're the first people ever doing theology. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, people have been doing it for a really long time. There's a lot that we can learn from them.